6 stories, 6 nightmares, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to face them? When I think back to middle school, there's one memory I've never been able to shake. It was supposed to be one of the best weeks of my life. A trip with my closest friends to a vacation house in Maine. But it turned into the single creepiest experience I've ever lived through. One that still makes my skin crawl whenever I remember it. It all started with Mark. On the surface, he was just another kid in our friend group. Quiet, a little weird, but harmless, or so I thought. We all grew up together, hanging out after school, playing video games, and staying up too late on weekends. But there was always something about Mark, something I couldn't quite explain. He would stare too long, laugh at the wrong times, and sometimes say things that felt off. I brushed it off as just his personality. Big mistake. The house in Maine was on a small, isolated island that you could only reach by ferry. No neighbors, no shops, no cars passing by. Just thick trees, the sound of waves, and the creak of the old house where we were staying. It was a perfect recipe for childhood adventure and for something much darker. The first couple of days seemed normal. We played outside, explored the island, and stayed up late telling scary stories. But then, little things started to go missing. My favorite baseball cap vanished from my bag. A couple of pens disappeared from my notebook. Someone's t-shirt went missing. At first, we blamed each other, joking around that someone was pulling pranks. But I started to notice a pattern. Most of the missing stuff was mine. One night, as I tried to sleep on the top bunk, I heard a whisper. At first, I thought one of the guys was talking in his sleep, but when I listened closely, I realized it wasn't sleep talking. Someone was whispering my name, slowly, again and again. My whole body froze. I sat up and looked down from the bunk, and there was Mark, just standing there in the dark, staring up at me. "Dude, what the hell are you doing?" I whispered, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just stared for a moment longer, then turned and walked out of the room. I wanted to believe maybe I imagined it, but I knew I hadn't. The next day, something even stranger happened. I went upstairs to use the bathroom, except the house didn't have a bathroom upstairs. It only had one on the main floor. Yet when I looked up toward the empty hallway, I saw him, Mark, standing completely still, half hidden in the shadows, watching me. When I blinked, he was gone. That's when I decided to snoop. Later that day, when everyone was outside, I snuck into his room. His bag was tucked in the corner, half zipped. Inside, I found all the missing things, my hat, my pens, my notebook, even some socks I hadn't realized were gone. But that wasn't the worst part. There was another notebook, a thick one, the cover worn down like it had been carried around for years. I opened it and my blood ran cold. Page after page was filled with violent drawings, twisted faces, dark symbols, disturbing scenes that looked like they came straight out of a nightmare. And then I turned to the pages in the back. That's when I realized every drawing, every note, was about me. There were sketches of me sleeping, notes about the things I said, the clothes I wore, even the way I walked. And then the last page, in huge, shaky letters, it said, "I'll do it tomorrow." I slammed the notebook shut, shoved everything back, and ran downstairs. For the rest of the trip, I couldn't even look at him, but he looked at me, constantly, watching, smiling faintly like he knew what I had found. The trip ended the day early. Our parents got involved. The police came, but Mark and his family were gone before anyone could confront them. They just vanished. No one saw him again. For years, I tried to forget. I told myself it was just a weird kid with a messed up imagination. Maybe he would grow out of it. Maybe it wasn't as serious as it looked. I convinced myself of that. Until last year, I was at work, sorting through some mail, when I noticed a small padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a single pen. My pen, the same one that had gone missing all those years ago in Maine. Taped to it was a scrap of paper. On it were 3 words written in that same shaky handwriting. I remember everything. When I was a teenager, my family rented a small cabin deep in the woods of Vermont. It was supposed to be a quiet getaway, a chance to disconnect from the chaos of the city and spend a week surrounded by nature. The cabin was old but cozy, with a stone fireplace and creaky wooden floors. The nearest town was miles away, and at night, the forest swallowed everything in complete silence. At first, I loved it. The fresh air, the sound of birds in the morning, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees. It felt almost magical. But by the 3rd night, that magic had started to twist into something else, something darker. It began with noises, subtle at first, a twig snapping outside when everyone was asleep, the crunch of leaves, like footsteps circling the cabin. My parents brushed it off as deer or raccoons, but I wasn't so sure. There was a rhythm to it, too deliberate to be random. The 4th night is burned into my memory. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of whispering. Not one voice, but several. They were low, almost chanting, and they came from just outside my window. My heart hammered in my chest as I pulled back the curtain. That's when I saw them. 3 figures standing just beyond the tree line. They were completely still, dressed in dark clothes, their faces hidden by hoods. They weren't holding flashlights, but somehow I could see them clearly in the moonlight. And the strangest part? They were all facing the cabin, facing me. I stumbled back, tripped over the rug, and scrambled into my parents' room. But when we all rushed to look, the figures were gone. My parents told me it was just my imagination, maybe shadows in the trees. But I knew what I saw. The next morning, we found something on the porch. A small bundle of sticks tied together with red string, shaped like a crude little doll. My dad tossed it into the fire, joking that some kids must have left it there. But when I glanced back toward the woods, I saw a flash of movement, like someone ducking out of sight. By then, I was terrified. I didn't want to stay another night, but my parents insisted it was nothing. They said we only had 3 days left, and we'd be fine. They were wrong. That night, everything escalated. Around midnight, the power went out. The entire cabin sank into darkness. We lit candles, trying to stay calm. When we heard it again, footsteps outside, dozens of them, moving slowly, circling the cabin. My dad grabbed a flashlight and opened the door, shining it into the trees. For a split second, the beam caught them. At least 10 figures stand among the trees, watching silently. And then, as if on cue, every single one of them stepped back and melted into the darkness. We barricaded the doors and windows, barely sleeping. By dawn, the power was back, like nothing had happened. My parents still tried to rationalize it, but I could see the fear in their eyes now. The final night was the worst. I woke up to the sound of something scratching against the walls, long, deliberate strokes like fingernails dragging across the wood. My mom whispered for us all to stay quiet, But curiosity got the better of me. I peeked through a crack in the boarded window, and I swear to you I saw a face, pale, thin, with wide, unblinking eyes staring back at me through the slats. The moment it noticed me, it smiled, not a normal smile, something stretched, unnatural, full of teeth. The next morning, we packed up and left. We didn't even eat breakfast, just threw everything into the car and drove until the cabin was a distant memory. Years later, I looked up stories about that area. Turns out, there are local legends about the Watchers, a group of people who live in those woods, performing strange rituals and marking cabins they choose to haunt. People in the nearby town warn hikers not to wander too far after dark. Some even say anyone who sees the Watchers is marked for life. I used to laugh at ghost stories. I don't laugh anymore, because every now and then when I walk home late at night, I get that same feeling I had in Vermont. The feeling of eyes on me, watching, waiting. When I was in college, I rented an old 2-story house with 2 of my friends. The rent was cheap, almost too cheap, but we didn't ask many questions. We were broke students, and the place seemed perfect. Hardwood floors, a big backyard, and even a dusty old attic we thought we could use for storage. From the very first night, the house felt off. The air inside was colder than outside, even with the heater running. The floorboards creaked when nobody was walking on them. At first, we laughed it off. Haunted house vibes, we joked. But the laughter didn't last long. The first real incident happened about a weekend. I was studying late in the living room when I heard footsteps above me, heavy and slow. The problem was, the attic was empty. We hadn't even gone up there since moving in. I froze, staring at the ceiling, my pen trembling in my hand. Then, just as suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The next morning, I mentioned it to my roommates. One of them, Jake, shrugged and said, "Old houses make noises." The other, Lisa, looked pale and admitted she'd heard the same thing 2 nights earlier, but didn't want to scare anyone. We decided to check the attic. The stairs were narrow and steep, leading up to a wooden door with a rusty handle. When we pushed it open, a wave of stale, cold air washed over us. The attic was dark, filled with dust and cobwebs. Nothing unusual, except for one thing. In the far corner, there was an old rocking chair, and it was moving, slowly, back and forth, back and forth. Jake ran over and grabbed it, trying to prove it was just the wind. But there were no windows up there, no draft strong enough to push a heavy chair. We all exchanged uneasy looks and decided to keep the attic locked from then on. But locking the door didn't stop it. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. We'd wake up to find the attic door cracked open. Even though we'd locked it the night before, items in the kitchen would go missing and reappear in odd places, like a spoon balance on top of the doorframe, or Lisa's keys found inside the freezer. And always at night, the footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing above us while we tried to sleep. The breaking point came one night around 3 a.m. I woke up to the sound of whispering. It was faint, almost like a radio turned low, but it was coming from right outside my bedroom door. My heart pounded as I crept closer. The whisper stopped. I opened the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. But when I glanced upward toward the attic hatch, I saw it. A shadow. Long, spindly fingers gripping the edge of the hatch, pulling back slowly into the darkness above. I slammed my door shut and didn't sleep a second that night. The next day, we decided we couldn't ignore it anymore. Jake, ever the skeptic, wanted to prove it was just our imagination. So we brought a flashlight, a baseball bat, and all three of us climbed into the attic together. At first, it was silent, dust floating in the beam of the flashlight, the rocking chair sitting still in the corner. Then Lisa gasped. On the floor, scratched into the wooden planks, were words, dozens of them, overlapping each other, written in frantic, jagged letters. Get out. Mine. Don't look. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and went out. In the darkness, we heard it, the creak of the rocking chair, moving again, and then a voice, low, raspy, right in our ears. Why are you here? We bolted down the stairs, out the front door, into the freezing night air. We didn't stop running until we were halfway down the block. That was the last time we ever went back to that house. We broke the lease, lost our deposit, and never spoke of it again. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it again. That slow, steady creak of a rocking chair. And I wonder, did we leave it behind, or did it follow us? Back in 2015, I was driving across the country for work. I'd been on the road for nearly 12 hours straight when exhaustion hit me like a wall. I wasn't picky. I just needed a bed, a shower, and a few hours of sleep before heading out again. Around midnight, I spotted a flickering neon sign for a roadside motel. The kind of place that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s. Faded paint, half-broken lights, and a front office with yellowing blinds. But I was too tired to care. I parked my car, dragged myself inside, and rang the bell at the counter. An old man shuffled out from the back. His eyes lingered on me for a little too long before he asked what I needed. I told him I just wanted a room for the night. That's when his expression changed. He scratched his head, glanced at a set of keys hanging on the wall, and muttered, "All we got left is room 6. I didn't understand the hesitation. A room was a room. I handed him my card, took the key, and made my way down the row of identical doors. When I got to room 6, I noticed the door was different from the others. The paint was peeling, the number was barely visible, and the doorknob looked newer, like it had been replaced recently. I brushed it off, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. At first glance, it looked like any other cheap motel room. Stained carpet, outdated furniture, and that faint smell of mildew you can never quite escape. But as I set my bag down, something felt wrong. The air was heavy, almost suffocating. The silence was so complete I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. And there was a mirror on the wall opposite the bed that made me uneasy. It was tall, stretching from floor to ceiling, its surface slightly warped. I tried to ignore it. I showered, crawled into bed, and turned off the light. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was being watched. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. My eyes darted to the window, thinking it was a branch, but there were no trees outside. That's when I realized the sound was coming from the mirror. I froze, staring at it in the dark. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like fingernails raking against the glass. My heart pounded as I reached for the lamp and flicked it on. Nothing. The room was empty. The mirror reflected only me, pale and wide-eyed. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was a dream, and crawled back under the covers. But then the reflection smiled. I wasn't smiling. My reflection was. Its mouth curled into a slow, unnatural grin that stretched too wide. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I watched as the reflection raised a hand and pressed it against the glass, And then I heard it, a whisper, muffled, but clear enough to send chills down my spine. "Let me out." I bolted. I didn't pack my things, didn't check out. I grabbed my car keys and sprinted out of that room as fast as I could. When I reached the front office, the old man was waiting. It was like he knew. He didn't even ask questions, just nodded slowly and said, "Room 6 doesn't like strangers." I drove until the sun came up, adrenaline keeping me awake. I never looked back. Months later, curiosity got the better of me. I tried to find that motel again, retracing my route, but it was gone. No sign, no building, nothing but an empty lot overgrown with weeds. And yet, sometimes late at night, I catch myself avoiding mirrors. Because once in a while, when I'm tired enough, I swear I see it again, that same reflection, waiting, smiling, tapping on the glass. Back in the late 90s, before streaming took over everything, there was a small independent radio station in my hometown. It wasn't popular, just static-filled local music, call-ins from truckers on the highway, and the occasional midnight talk show. But one night, something happened that made me and everyone who tuned in question what we were really listening to. It was October, just past midnight, and I couldn't sleep. I flipped through the radio stations, and that's when I landed on 97.4 FM, the little station I almost never listened to. But this time, something was different. Instead of music, there was a voice. It wasn't an announcer. It wasn't smooth or cheerful or rehearsed. It was shaky, uneven, almost like someone was whispering directly into the microphone. "Is anyone out there listening?" the voice asked. I remember sitting up in bed, frowning. The tone was strange, desperate, even. I stayed tuned, curious. The man on the radio said his name was Thomas. He claimed he wasn't a DJ, just someone trying to survive the night. He begged listeners not to change the dial. Said he was trapped inside the station. Said something was outside trying to get in. At first, I thought it was some kind of Halloween prank, a late-night horror show. But then I noticed something. He kept describing things that matched real life. He mentioned the storm outside, the exact thunder I could hear rumbling past my own window. He described sirens passing by on a nearby highway. And just as he said it, I heard them too. That's when I realized whatever was happening, it wasn't a scripted performance. Thomas explained that he'd been filling in for the overnight DJ. When the power flickered, the backup generator kicked on, but with it came something else. He said he heard a knock on the back door of the station. At first, he thought it was a late-night delivery driver, but when he looked at the security monitor, there was no one there, just a shadow of something tall, too tall, stretching across the parking lot. He tried to laugh it off, but the knocking didn't stop. It grew louder, sharper, until it echoed through the station. "It knows I'm alone," Thomas whispered, "and it wants me to open the door." I'll never forget the way his voice broke when he said, "It's not human." Listeners started calling in. I remember because the station played the calls live. Some people cursed at him, saying it was a stupid stunt. Others sounded genuinely terrified, begging him to stay calm, to barricade the doors. Then came the sound. A deep metallic screech ripped through the speakers, followed by a thud so loud it made my windows rattle. Thomas screamed, fumbled with the microphone, whispering frantically, "It's inside! Oh, God, it's inside!" And then silence. The station went dead. I sat there, frozen. The radio still on, but nothing playing but static. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I tried to find out what had happened. I called the station, but the number was disconnected. I drove past the building, but it looked abandoned. Windows boarded up, sign missing, like it hadn't been in use for years. I asked around town, but no one admitted to knowing a Thomas. Some people even swore that 97.4 had been off the air for months. But I know what I heard. Thousands of people tuned in that night. I still meet people who whisper about it. About the night the station broadcast its last words. Sometimes late at night, when I scan to the radio, I pause at the static. And if I listen closely, really closely, I swear I can still hear it. A faint, trembling voice. Is anyone out there listening? There's a road in my hometown that most people avoid after dark. It's not because of crime or traffic. It's because of the house. Everyone knows it. An old Victorian-style mansion that sits at the end of Willow Lane, hidden behind towering oaks. The shutters are broken, the paint long peeled away, and the windows, at least the ones not shattered, stare out like black, empty eyes. For decades, kids dare each other to run up the front steps, touch the door, and sprint away. But no one, at least no one sane, ever tried to go inside. At least no one until me. I was 17, restless, and convinced the stories were just that, stories. People said the house was cursed, that anyone who entered never came out the same. But to me, it was the perfect place to prove my friends wrong. One October night, with the air sharp and cold, I grabbed a flashlight and walked down Willow Lane alone. The trees leaned over the road, their branches scratching against each other in the wind. By the time I reached the iron gate, I was already questioning myself. The gate groaned as I pushed it open. The path leading up to the house was overgrown with weeds, crunching under my boots. My flashlight beam shook as I raised it toward the front door. It was massive, carved with strange symbols I couldn't recognize. Some looked like scratches, others like letters, but none of it made sense. My heart hammered as I pressed my hand against the wood. The door swung open on its own. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust and rot. The smell was so thick it clung to my throat. I stepped into the foyer, shining my light across torn wallpaper and broken furniture. The silence was overwhelming. And then I heard it, footsteps upstairs. I froze. My first thought was that someone else was squatting inside, maybe another stupid teenager like me. But the steps were slow, deliberate, too heavy. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. Just another step. And another. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I crept toward the staircase. Each board groaned under my weight as I climbed. When I reached the top, my flashlight flickered. I smacked it, and when the beam steadied again, I saw the hallway stretching ahead. And there, at the very end, was a door. It was slightly open, light spilling out from the crack. I held my breath and walked toward it, my legs trembling. As I pushed the door wider, the light filled the hallway. But it wasn't electric light. It was candlelight. Inside was a bedroom, perfectly preserved. Unlike the rest of the house, it looked untouched. A bed neatly made, curtains clean, candles burning on every surface. And sitting in the chair by the window was a woman. Her back was to me, hair long and dark, her dress old-fashioned. "Ma'am," I whispered, my voice cracking. Slowly, she turned her head. Her face was pale, stretched too tight over her bones. Her eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to swallow the light. And her mouth, God, her mouth, twisted into a smile so wide I thought her skin would tear. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. But the room was wrong. The door I just entered through was gone. Behind me was only another wall, lined with candles. The woman rose from the chair. Her movements were stiff, jerky, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. She whispered something, but her lips didn't move in sync with the sound. "Stay." I spun, searching for any way out, and that's when I noticed something horrific. The walls weren't walls at all. They were mirrors, dozens of them, stacked side by side, reflecting me from every angle. Only, my reflections weren't moving the same way I was. Some were smiling, some were screaming silently, and some weren't me at all. One by one, the reflections began stepping out of glass. I don't remember how I escaped. The last thing I recall was the sound of shattering glass and that voice whispering over and over again, "Stay, stay, stay." When I woke up, I was lying in the middle of Willow Lane. My flashlight was beside me, its batteries dead. The house was gone. Just an empty lot where it had always stood. At least, that's what everyone swore when I tried to show them. But I know what I saw, and sometimes at night, I swear I hear footsteps on the stairs of my own home. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. And when I look into the mirror, I can't help but notice that sometimes the reflection doesn't blink when I do. If you made it this far, congratulations. You just survived 6 of the most chilling stories we've ever told. But tell me, which one haunted you the most? Was it the voice on the radio, the house that waits, or maybe something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be reading them in the dark. And remember, the next time you hear footsteps or see something move in the corner of your eye, don't ignore it. Because sometimes the story doesn't end when the video does. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep at all.